Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our breakout sessions. Today, you are in breakout number 3 on a topic sessions focus on an unconventional way to impress your management and the board. Joining us today, we have Terence and Serene representing BitSight. Will walk us through the new developments of cyber risk for the professions. Now, before we go through all the sessions, as well as introduce our speaker today, let us know a bit more about BitSight. Serene, can you let us know what does BitSight do? I understand that on a surface it's a security rating company, but can you just deep dive a little bit more for us?
Sure. So essentially, look at it like a financial credit rating. Just like I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with like Moody's, S&P, Dun & Bradstreet, how you will use that rating to measure the financial credit worthiness of an organization. BitSight essentially is a 3-digit number that gives you an indication of the cybersecurity posture, how good or not so good, and it gives you insights into what are the potential gaps from a cybersecurity risk angle. And it is completely non-intrusive, so it's surprising. It's really wonderful how you can see the amount of information that you can collect just based on externally observable events. So it is an objective tool that's measurable, that's actionable, and that's security ratings.
Okay, well, great, thank you. I understand that it's actually quite important now because cybersecurity is almost in every single board decisions, and they take it very seriously, as well as when company looking into invest in another company or doing business with other company, looking at the cybersecurity ratings are equally important, just like they're looking at the Moody or other rating company in financial services. Our speaker for today, Serene Xiao, Head of Asia Pacific Regions for BitSight. Serene, I know you for a long time, since we collaborated, I think about 4 years ago. Yeah. I've been working with Serene, like I say, since we host a cyber attack event. And a lot of participants that usually come to our events always say that Serene is basically one of the best person to work with when it basically come to customer satisfactions. And I believe that over the last few years, you established really strong channel partnership and mentoring your team. And when you first started, your team is pretty small in Singapore. How many people now?
There are about 10 of us here in Asia Pacific, spread across Singapore and Sydney office. So it's really good to see how the team has grown. Thank you to all the customers, really.
Right. Okay, so joining us, Terence Cheung, Senior Consulting Engineer for Asia Pacific. Terence, you've been helping, you are the technical guy, so the one that, most of the clients go to you because your experience managing third-party risk and organizational risk exposure. So can you walk us through 4 years ago and now, when it comes to, third-party risk, what has changed?
Yeah, well, I can't really talk about 4 years ago. Honestly, I've joined BitSight for 3 years now. I can speak to that. And yeah, so back 3 years ago, there was only me and Serene. It was a very good journey. It's been exciting. It continues to grow, and I've seen a stark difference, especially in APAC, ASEAN particularly, if that's the scope of today's conversation. Back 3 years ago, no one would have known what exactly is a security risk rating. There wasn't even such a term. Until just last year when Gartner gave us this term as an industry. Now, a lot of people thought that we are a VAPT tool, just like the likes of Tenable and Qualys. And today people are starting to understand the usage of the risk context when communicating with the different stakeholders. So it's no longer just talking specifically about, we had 10 open ports last month versus 2 open ports this month. It's really more about what's the likelihood of us suffering a data breach this year versus last year. So it makes it a lot more relevant, a lot more understandable as well for the business side of the house.
Okay, great. So let's dive in. Terence, since that you just kindly just explained to us what's at stake or anything like that, the question I just want to direct to you. So what has changed in the cybersecurity landscape in APAC, especially the role of cybersecurity risk professionals?
Yeah, that's a really great question. It's a tough question as well. We've seen a lot of transformation, and if you are an InfoSec practitioner and if you've not witnessed or noticed the changes, then it is something you got to start paying attention. We've seen a lot of regulatory changes, especially in APAC. I mean, GDPR, everyone is aware, right? Privacy protection concerns. And if you realize that there is always a trend, right? There's always a trend that starts in the United States that somehow transfers over to EMEA and then EMEA to APAC. A good example is in Australia. They've got APRA CPS 234 that mandates an organization, FI particularly, to monitor their third parties, and we see that in Hong Kong's CRAF also. Right, so the trend is definitely happening. So more relevant to the InfoSec practitioners is that in the United States you have the CMMC, the Cybersecurity Maturity Model, and that it's mandated for defense vendors to comply to. And we start to see that in Australia as well. So Australia today, they've got a defense industry security policy certification that it's required for all defense contractors, and you'll start to see that translate to our region also, right? So that's very interesting movements in terms of the industry, and as an InfoSec practitioner, it is also something that you want to keep your pulse on.
Okay, with that in mind, you see, cybersecurity. We see breaches all the time, and this breach is bigger than the last breach, and the last breach is even bigger than the previous breach or anything like that. Just last month, okay, Redmart has 1.1 million user accounts stolen from their decommissioning app after they move over to Lazada app. Attacks like this are still prevalent, right? Because it's so easy to forget to eradicate the data after the migration of new system, especially right now with COVID-19, with work from home, with the new normal. A lot of organizations are moving their system to cloud or hybrid cloud, and they'll be odd at some other shadow IT apps or old soft legacy that they forgot to decommissioning, or they forgot to erase those data. So Serene, I mean, what would would this continue to happen when and what do you see the trends is in this market?
I think that's a really dangerous question. Will it continue to happen?
Another question.
I definitely don't predict breaches, but if you look at where and how the attackers are going, how the cybersecurity landscape is transforming, and especially this year, it has brought about transformation better than and faster than any other organizations have gone through, right? COVID-19 literally has brought about transformation. There is one area that Terence and I, having spoken to so many customers across the Asia-Pac region, we noticed a lot of companies, whether in an M&A situation or merging a new BU, there's a tendency to have that blind spot, right? And if you remember, I talked about external footprinting at the beginning of the introduction about what is security ratings. That is even more important today. As our attack surface grow, it is really critical to understand what the organization's cybersecurity footprint is. And Jeff, you correctly pointed out shadow IT and legacy systems. And these are all potential areas where we are giving attackers an opportunity to monetize stolen data. So what can InfoSec cybersecurity professionals do differently compared to before? What changes are required of them to take on a new set of, I guess, landscape challenges that brings along with it?
Okay. I'm going to grill you more, Serena, because there's so many questions in this area that how do we prep our security professionals to be more vigilant and what can we do, etc. and this sort of thing, and how do I mean especially in example how do you help customer to tackle cyber risks? So Terence, can you walk us through a little bit on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So to give some context to this, I think credits to all the InfoSec practitioners out there watching this or not. They've all been doing really well, right? Given the constraints that they have in terms of budget, in terms of manpower, in terms of skill sets. And I think when they start to ask for budgets for projects to better secure the organization, one of the questions that they always get asked is ROI. Why are we doing this? What's the return on investment? How do you justify for this budget, right? And it's a really tough question. And in the perspective of the of the business side of the house, it's like cyber insurance. It's just like endless pit. You just throw money into it, and you never really see any real ROI. And that's a real challenge for InfoSec practitioners. In fact, being in the industry for so long, I've ever been asked, Terence, we've been buying solutions and solutions. Where is there an end to this? Unfortunately, the answer is no, right? We are all perpetually caught in a cat and mouse game. So it's really important to then kind of change the tune a bit, right? Not just to be really technical about it, but you've really got to adopt a more strategic mindset, right? And I'm speaking to the InfoSec practitioners. Now, of course, when you want to change that conversation from a technical conversation to a more business conversation, you are then having to start to understand what are the concerns of the business person, right? And you think about that in those lenses. Risk is a very easy conversation to talk about, right? So if you have some sort of metrics that can demonstrate that, hey, you know what, if you're performing at a certain level, the likelihood of you suffering a data breach is that much lesser, then it makes it a lot more relevant for the business person, right? So think about this. If you are going to the CFO, right, or you're going to the CEO to ask for $100,000 to buy the newest generation firewall to better secure your organization, and if you can tie that investment to an ROI of, you know what, if I invest in this, I'm going to be able to reduce our cyber risk, right, the likelihood of a data breach by 50%. That's going to be a language that the non-technical people can understand. So it's really important to kind of change the way we think, right? And to that extent, as you start to understand the different metrics available, not just the VAPT solutions, not just the audits that you always go through, as we are all aware. Look, being compliant doesn't necessarily mean you're secure. Compliance is just one step. You've got to really evolve now and not just look at the point-in-time assessments, which can be really taxing on your time and effort, but also consider the more passive means of monitoring your cybersecurity footprint and use that as a means of communicating to the non-technical stakeholders. Of course, when I talk about the non-technical stakeholders, it's not just your C-level, right? It's also your marketing department. It's also your procurement. It's also your legal, right? Serene mentioned earlier on mergers and acquisitions. Why would one target be better than another target for consideration? All this are various means that you need to contend with as an InfoSec practitioner, right? If you're not already roped in to do third-party assessments because of a partnership that your BU is getting involved in, or your procurement is roping you in to do a third-party assessment for a project they're going to award to for outsource requirement, then it is definitely something you should be aware of, because it's going to happen sooner or later.
Okay, I see what you're saying now. So it is true that there's still a lot of challenges for InfoSec professional to convince their board, in particular non-technical and very traditional business. But with security rating reports or with third-party reports, or risk report, that would make it slightly easier. And also, if we can show ROI, that will make it a lot easier. Is that what it is?
It is, yes. So
Yeah.
the
Okay.
business, yeah, the business people think in terms of risk, right? Why would they invest in a certain business and not another business? Why would they, grow the number of employees within an organization? Why would they choose to invest in a certain R&D? They're all looking in terms of risk of returns on investment, right? What's the risk? Am I going to make money out of this? Am I not? So if you start to talk to them using these kinds of language, then it's going to be a lot more relevant to them.
Now, the issue is, maybe Serene, you can actually answer this. This would then require the CISO to change their role, no longer just looking after information security, but the entire how to convince board, how to make a case, and how to make everything work. On top of that, there actually are shortage of talents in Singapore. Last week, I hosted a webinar, and one of CISO say, you know what does CISO stand for this day? It's called career is surely over if you have to.
No, not
Can you
yet.
walk us through how does the CISO need to transform over the next few years or so, especially post-COVID?
Good question. Well, career is definitely not over for the CISO. In fact, more than ever before, I think they are taking on an even more important role. But if you look at the persona, the profile of a CISO today, they really have to be a multitasker and no longer just focus on technical aspects of what happens in the infosec side of things in the organization. And I don't really want to use this word, but I do want to use this word that they do have to have things in their tool set, their toolkit, and security ratings is becoming more and more important because it represents a number that their non-technical counterparts can comprehend, understand. And again, going back to that statement, that this quote that I want to steal from a customer, how do you give security a shape, right? And coming out of COVID, at which point do you overtake? At this point when business is a bit challenging, do you slow down or do you actually speed up? I have had very interesting conversations with CISOs and CIOs, and they are actually taking this time. They told me that cybersecurity spend hasn't actually dropped. In fact, it has increased. Cybersecurity initiatives have increased across the organization. Just one of our customer, I won't mention any names here, one of our customers in Japan, what they have done with security ratings, for example, they use it as a common metric across the different offices around the world. But the CISO, the global CISO, actually use this as a way to communicate to the chief risk officer, the different head of regions, to help them understand what are the potential risks cybersecurity can have and the impact on the business. And this is someone that I really see as a transformational CISO. He is definitely an extrovert, right? And I think he cares a lot about his employees. But beyond that, how does he make it easier for the team to do their job, right? Keep the lights on. Beyond the basics, what can they do differently? Yep.
But we know that I think the core matter is that what value can CISO add in today's world is a constantly changing world. And what does InfoSec team need to embrace to really support their CISO and their organization? Terence, why don't you take this?
Yeah, sure thing. Now, just to give a bit more context again, when you talk about security risk ratings, it's really important for the ratings to have some kind of correlation, right? So BitSight's security rating has been correlated to a likelihood of a data breach, not just by one, but by three independent and objective organizations, right? So we have had Air Worldwide, if you're familiar. We had Advisen, right? And also IHS Markit, which is a market researching company. So these are really outstanding companies that's looked at BitSight's rating, right? And if they've kind of determined that, look, if your company is rating 400 or below, then you're going to be 5 times more likely to suffer a data breach as compared to a company that's rated 700 or more. All right, so being able to put things into this kinds of context and explain to to the non-technical side of the house that, look, investing in this helps me with this rating, reduces the risk. It's going to help with that conversation, like I mentioned earlier on. And in this case, it's been objectively verified, right? So non-sponsored studies. There is also another recent study that's been released by BitSight. In fact, not a study, but a collaboration with a German indexing company called Selective. And Selective did a study on BitSight's ratings, compared it, performance of better performing companies against the stock index world, right? And they realized that companies that are rated well on BitSight, it's going to likely outperform the market by 7%. Right, so 7% is pretty significant. I buy some stocks myself. If you get 4 or 5%, you're doing pretty well. But at 7%, it's pretty impressive. So I'm probably going to use the tool for my own investing purpose. But outside of that, specific for the InfoSec team, right? Understanding that this is now the context. How can you help your CISO? How can you help yourself? Because as time goes on, you're all going to promote and be CISOs yourselves. You really need to start to be more considerate about, what are the use cases, not just the operational closing open ports and then remediating on infections, but there are really, one key thing you want to look at immediately, right? That's security performance management. And of course, today you have all means of doing that, compliances, you'll do VA scans, right? But those are, like I mentioned, very technical assessments. You want to have the risk assessment. Right, so how well are you performing against your peers, right? So it's important to have that context, right? It's also important, right? Of course, you have other means of performing that, comparing that performance over time, like how well you're doing today over the last 3 months. So that's a very key use case. But being able to communicate as how your programs have reduced the risk for the organization 1 year ago in 2019 to today, right? And if you want to put that into dollar terms, if you've read the IBM study on the cost of a data breach, you'll know, in ASEAN, in today's context, in 2020, the cost of a data breach is $2.71 million, right? It takes 287 days just to remediate on those, on the data breach. So you compare that to 2019, it has actually increased by almost $100,000, and you continue to see that number growing up. Right? So that is one use case, security performance management, and that is of course your core job, right? And then moving on, the other use case you want to be fairly aware of is the third-party risk management. And we start to see this use case a lot in the United States as well as EMEA. Now, as you understand, as you outsource services, and like what Jeff asked earlier on about Lazada and RedMart, it is a third-party situation. So how are you going to be able to monitor your third party actively, right? Not just depend on the once a year assessment. How are you going to assess new vendors, right? New potential vendors quick enough, right? So if you can do things quickly, effectively and efficiently, that is going to help you reduce costs, right? The less time you spend on it, the more savings you are actually translating back to your organization, right? So in this way, right, you can also change the conversation of InfoSec team from being a back office support role into a competitive edge, right? So as you become better performing in terms of cybersecurity, leveraging off that selective index that I just shared about, you can absolutely put a dollar value to your performance, right? And demonstrate this outwardly towards your partners, towards your potential investors. You can then demonstrate that, hey, look, investing in our own company absolutely helps you become more secure also, right? So in this way, you transform yourself from an InfoSec back office role to a forerunning competitive edge for your organization, right?
Are you trying to transform?
Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I wanted to
No,
say
go
that's
ahead.
part of being a transformational CISO. Speed is everything,
Okay.
right? How do you transform or translate the information that you have, the details, as fast as relevant to the board, to the management, and to help them understand where exactly does the gap comes in, what additional investment is required, how have their investment turned into ROI for the company.
Mm-hmm.
Right. The more I hear, actually, your product is not just for CISO. Corporate strategy, procurement, CFO can really use this rating to beef up their company portfolio. Right?
That's right. That's right. Yes.
Definitely.
So it can be a very technical solution. We can go down into the nuts and bolts, but at the high level, we're really presenting you a 3-digit number, like Serene started off with. So it can be really easy to understand, but at the same time, if you want to get down into weeds and to know exactly what is going on, the data is all there for you also.
Okay. Now, since that this is a discussion segment, the questions get harder will come to the end. When you visit customer, there will be some company you basically go and see that, oh my God, your security rating is terrible. How do you explain to them? What do you need to do? How do they get up to the, let's just say, I don't know, rating number A while they're in rating number D or something?
That's a really interesting question. So I think, let me start off. Well, I don't think anyone wants to, call their baby ugly, right? So it can be a very challenging conversation at times, especially for someone who is not exposed to something like this before. But I think what is important is once they get past that stage and we are able to put things into context and help them understand that we are here to present and give them a lens, right? Where are the potential gaps? Where is unlocked? What is broken? Where to fix? The shadow IT, the blind spots. I have heard of stories from spotting a decom X-ray machine, right? To how, from a merger and acquisition use case perspective, the attacker was purposefully targeting the smaller company to get into the big company. So how do you give that more context, right, Terence?
Yeah, that's a very good point. There's a lot of stories out there, which we probably won't want to share over this platform, but engage with us. We're happy to share more. But it's also important for the audience to be aware that BitSight is not a pay-to-play vendor, right? So we are not blackmailing you. Just because your rating looks bad, it's simply factual, right? This is what we are observing externally. So if you do feel that it's not fair that we are providing you with this rating, come and talk to us, right? If there's certain IP addresses that you are no longer using, but somehow BitSight is picking up, that might be how it's affecting your rating. So talk to us. We are happy to support you and explain to you how exactly the thing works, as well as to give you a good opportunity, a fair opportunity to better represent yourself, right, to the public.
Oh, you can even identify the IP address they've forgotten, and then you probably have to remind them. It's like, you don't use this anymore. It's better to delete them. Otherwise,
you'll be surprised. We've seen that a lot, especially with the MNCs, and then you're very geographically dispersed, and you're trying to, out of Singapore, try to manage someone that's out of, say, Kazakhstan. It's going to be a tough conversation. So as you have all these different footprints all over the world, having an objective means of monitoring them somehow really helps the conversation also.
Oh, that's good. That's really exciting. Serene and Terence, thank you so much for sharing these particular sessions and all the tools that are out there that you guys can help. And also, it's really good to see that how you and your team are transforming cybersecurity role, helping CISO to become more as a value business partner. So what next for our listener and our participant today?
Well, contact us. We definitely want to be able to give you a glimpse of potentially your organization snapshot, or even snapshot into your third parties, either vendors or suppliers, or a benchmarking report. Contact us, and my email is there. Thank you.
No problem. Now, ladies and gentlemen, so if you do have questions for Serene or Terence, feel free to drop it in the chat box or email them directly. With questions like that, I'm pretty sure you just want to email them directly, because no one wants to know all sorts of things that they do. They don't even, still today, 3 years on, they won't tell me a lot of things that are happening, okay? Until I get Serene a bit tipsy. But thank you so much for your time, and thank you all the participants for joining us on these exciting sessions. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.